Well, thanks very much for attending, everybody. We're going to keep this as tight as possible to about 45 minutes. I want to go through in part one the new features, which will cover things like excavation and general works permits and a range of electrical and boiler and pressure system permit types that we've introduced. We're going to go through the personal protective equipment, PPE feature, and then go on to electronic signatures. And moving on to the demonstration itself. What I want to reassure you all is that as of Monday, when this goes live, it's actually going to be released on Sunday evening. All of the new features, or as much of it as possible, will actually be switched off so that it won't impact everybody dramatically on Monday morning. What you'll be able to do is to switch these features on in your training systems, have a go with them, see what you like and what you don't like. Feedback to us if you want to, and then if you'd like us to switch it on in your live system, we're more than able to do that for you when you're ready. So what I'm going to do is just walk through the life cycle of a permit and explain how it will all appear with these new features. So I've logged in as myself, but I'm part of a specialist contractor company, so I'm a requester who wants to come onto site. And the first thing I'm going to do here is to create a request. So I'll create a request to go to a building called Data Center and Offices. And I've been asked to come in by the FM company. So I'm going to select the FM company who's controlling this work. That's where the authorized persons are. And I'll confirm that. And then I will put in a work order number. I'll select who's going to do the work. I'll put myself on the job, and I'm going to put Frederick with me because I know I'm going to be doing some hot works. I'll pick the dates and the times. So as you'll recognize, none of this has changed. This is just normal functionality. I'm going to work on the heating side of the air conditioning, and I'm actually going to be doing a repair here. And the particular floor is in the basement. And there's my RAMs that I need. And just filling in a bit of detail here, I'm going to say that I'm doing a repair to the boiler casing. It's got damaged, and it's going to include some welding. So you can imagine this is going to trigger a hot works permit. So this screen is largely the same as it's always been. What you'll notice is that I've got a couple of new special risks here. One called general work, and the other one is excavation. These will trigger the new permit types. And if I were to trigger excavation, it will ask you when you're doing the excavation within the access period, very much like it does the work at height questions and the confined space questions and the hot works questions that we've seen. So if I were to add an excavation permit, it would simply ask me when I'm going to be doing that as part of the bundle. What I'm going to do in this specific instance is to add the hot works, and I'm not going to trigger the isolating fire systems. I'm going to leave that to other people to add later on. The other things you might notice slightly different in these special risks is instead of saying switching circuits, which I think most of you have live on your systems, we have electrical isolation required. Instead of having opening and closing valves, we have boilers and pressure systems, and we still have the isolating fire systems. Now, these have changed slightly in as much as they don't now create draft permits for other people to fill in. They simply create a request for an isolation, which the APs will consider and make a judgment on. And I'll show you where they do that when we get onto the AP view. So we're just going to proceed as a requester, having triggered the hot works, going to the next step. What we'll see that's new here is that we've got the PPE for the first time. This will not appear when you switch it on Monday, but we can bring this on. And what it'll list in this little table is that you'll always have site access, but you'll then have the special risks that have been triggered. Now, if you're doing lone work out of hours, for instance, you might need to bring specific equipment along. Typically, when you're going to a site, you may have to have safety boots on, and you may need to have a high-vis jacket. And because I'm doing some welding and brazing, I may well need safety glasses, and I might well bring some gauntlets along. So as a requester, what I'm doing here is indicating the PPE that I'm proposing to bring along. And that will be shown to people further downstream when they're making their assessment of the permit or issuing it, and they can amend that and add things to it if they feel it's necessary. But at this stage, we're just going to start off with that PPE there. When I go down to submit this permit, it's going to pop up the hot works. And this is where you would have the timings for things like work at height or excavation or confined spaces. And I'm going to add my hot work shift here. It's just a one-day request that I've made. So I'm going to do that from, say, 9 o'clock to, say, 4 o'clock. And I'll save that hot work shift. So I'm now ready to submit the request. And that will go off and notify APs as it normally does. So the difference there from normal is we've got some slightly different safety precautions. The isolation type ones just request isolations rather than actually creating drafts. And you've got PPE that you can fill in on that screen. So what I'm going to do now is move across to the world of an AP. Bear with me, I'll find that screen. There we are. So I'm now going to log back in as Howard Albury. He will have been sent an email telling him about the permit that's been sent through, and he can go and have a look at that. I'll just expand those. What I've got at the moment is just an access permit and a hot works permit. Now, if I go and have a look at the access permit, what I will see is that I've got a slightly different control here. This is what you'll see before we switch on all the different isolation types. Typically, people have been able to do electrical isolations, they've been able to create live work permits, and they've been able to do mechanical and fire system isolations. And this is the type of control that you'll see to start with. What you can add here is a general works permit. That will create a little pop-up for you to fill in, and I'll explain these pop-ups in a minute. I'm just going to explain this control and how it will vary when we add your other isolations. What I'm going to do is to go to a control where I can switch the new ones on for us. And I'm going to bring in certificate of isolation, a high voltage isolation, a sanction to test boilers and pressure systems, and a sanction to test electrical work. Now, when I refresh this page now, this is what will happen once we've enlivened your system. What it'll then do is to bring in a lot more permit types that the APs and issuers can now work with. So we've got a full suite of the type of permits that most FM companies use. They can do low voltage isolations, high voltage isolations, certificates of isolation for simple circuits. They can test electrical work, they can do sanctions for work on or near live, and they can do boiler system isolations and testing boiler systems, as well as the standard 3 fire system isolations that we've always had. So let me just show you what happens when you trigger one of those. I'm going to say at this stage that the APs recognize that because they're doing hot works, we need to have a fire system isolation. When I tick that box, what you get is a pop-up now, and this is the same for all of these isolation types. You get a pop-up that captures the information that's needed. So the difference here is rather than generating a draft request for somebody to fill in, if you're an AP that can complete these permit types, it just pops up on the screen and you can complete that information in line rather than going to a draft. The information you're asked is who's the authorizing company, and in this case I'm going to choose the FM company. Who will do the isolation? Indeed, it'll be the FM company again that does that, and Howard himself can do this this isolation, but he's going to need somebody. He won't need somebody with him because it's just a fire system isolation. He can change the times if he wants to, but it defaults to the same times as the access permit. He can then pick the system that he's going to isolate, and in this case he's just going to isolate some fire alarm devices. He can select his RAMs or his switching schedule, and then he's asked some further questions which he may know the answers to at this stage, but he may not. At this point, he may not have worked out exactly what fire zones are going to be isolated, what electrical systems might need switching off, whether there's any locks going to be applied. This may be more applicable to be filled in at the point of issue. And it may be better to do that at the place of work, as we'll see we can do shortly. So at this stage, we're going to stop at that point for the AP and just submit that fire system isolation. I can then go on to approve my access permit. And when it takes me back to my tree view, what we'll see now is we've got 3 permits in the bundle rather than just the 2 that I started with. And we've got this fire system isolation awaiting approval as well. So I'll go through those 3 permits one in turn and put my approval on there. What you'll see that's also different on this isolation, on this HotWorks screen, is that now that I've added an isolation, in this case a fire system isolation, we've got a small box here that lists any isolations that are added to this bundle. This can become quite complex if you've got mechanical isolations, fire system isolations, and electrical isolations, but you can see them all and what status they're in, and that will help you decide whether you're going to add further isolations if you think that's appropriate. And what's new with this system is that you are able to add new isolations all the way through the life cycle of the bundle. So an AP can add the isolations, an issuer can add the isolations, and even when the bundle is open, you can still add isolations if they become necessary during the life of the bundle. So when I'm assessing the HotWorks permit, I've got the safety precautions down here. Now, I think you'll probably remember that you used to have yes and no down the left-hand side of this selection here. And this was where you decide whether these safety precautions are appropriate for the permit in question. Now, whereas these are the standard safety precautions for HotWorks, it may be that a particular building doesn't have sprinklers, in which case you can hide that particular one from the questioning. And the reason we've gone for the words display and hide is that you will now be able to fill in the answers to these questions online on a tablet at the place of work. And they use yes, no, and not applicable answers. So rather than having yeses and nos here, we've just changed these to hide and display so that it's a little bit less confusing. Now, again, as the AP, I can review the PPE that's been added. If I wanted to add further PPE, I can. I can add, for instance, earplugs. I might want to add earplugs. And if I add that, that's going to generate an email back to the requester and to the competent person, and to tell them that they do need to bring additional PPE because it's been advised by the AP, the authorizing person. So once I've finished that, I go to the bottom of the page and I put my password in and approve the permit. And then I've just got one more to do in the bundle. I just need to approve the fire system isolation. And the process is exactly the same here. We've got the isolation table. We've got the safety precautions that are relevant to fire system isolations. And I can then approve this one in the bundle. And I'll approve that. Once they've all been approved, that is now a fully approved bundle, which I can go and collect again. We'll expand that. And then I've got to get these ready for issuing. Now, when I open up these permits now, you'll see there's some slightly new features. I'll go to the access permit first. Now, what I want you to imagine is that I'm on a tablet at this point. I've actually got my computer in tablet mode at the moment, so I've got a touch-sensitive screen, and this is exactly how it would appear on something like an iPad or any other tablet, or even your phone as it comes to it. So all of these things now I can do at the place of work rather than at a desk. Now, what I'm going to do here is to explain how I can add further isolations at this point. So we've got this fire system isolation that's been added, but if I feel that if somebody's going to be working on the boilers, that I need to do an electrical isolation as well, I can add it at this point. and I would fill in these boxes and add the further information. Now, the closer we get to the actual issuing, the more likely I am to know where things are going to be isolated, where they're likely to be earthed, what lock numbers are going to be used. And so you would expect these to be filled in at this point. They're still not compulsory, because you may feel that you want to fill those in on a printed permit at the place of work. And that's fine. You can still leave them blank at this stage and fill them in on the permit itself. So that's, if I were to complete that and submit it, that's how I would add an electrical isolation. If at some stage after that electrical isolation, I felt that some testing needed to be done on those electrical circuits before it was put back on and back into service, I could trigger one of those. So I've now got a test electrical work pop-up come up here, and slightly different wording in here. For instance, in this case, we've got earths may be removed at for testing, and that's specific to this particular pop-up. What's nice is that these are all configurable. So if you have particular questions on your permits that you like to work with, we can configure them to exactly your own needs. So I'll just cancel that one. So I'm just leaving it with the fire system isolation in the bundle. Now, as the issuer, what I'm able to do now is to sign the permit, which I haven't been able to do before. So I can sign this by clicking on the sign button, and you are asked at this stage for 2 signatures. So the authorizing issuer would be the first person to sign this, and if we remember, that was Howard Albury. So if I just sign this on my screen and save that. If at any point you're not happy with your signature, you can undo bits, you can clear the whole thing and have another go. So you don't have to get that right first time. If I save that signature, I'm then going to put my signature on. And then I've captured both of the signatures. Now, the intention of going of these signatures and being electronic is that we're trying to respond to a lot of clients' desire to go completely paperless. So you don't have to actually print your permits anymore. What you can do is to email it to the competent person. Now, in this case, Simon Olive, myself, is the competent person. So that button is dynamic. It will put whoever's name is in there. And if I click on that, what that will do is to send it to Simon Olive as an email, and he can open that PDF and he'll see the 2 signatures embedded in the document. So what I'm going to show you is the generation of that. I just generate that. It will create a little PDF. It's the same one that has been sent to Simon Olive, but the issuer can have a look at that as well. I'll open that. And most important, if I move down to the key bit here, we can see that we've got the signatures embedded in the right boxes. Now, I started out with some quite large boxes, those pink boxes on the screen, and I could have signed them anywhere on the screen. I might decide to sign it up in the top left-hand corner. I might want to fill the whole box with a great big signature. Doesn't matter what you do, it resizes it, cuts out all the blank around it, and just pops it into these fields ready for posterity or for showing. So that's the permits themselves. What I now need to do is the same for the hotworks. But what we'll see on the hotworks is I've got the safety precaution questions appearing. And you imagine if I'm using a tablet here, this would be very simple to go through and to say what the answers to these safety precautions are. And the first one, there isn't sprinkler in that. I switched off the sprinklers, but I'm going to put yes to most of these and fill that in. And then I'm going to sign this again, because that's the hotworks permit. And if I generate this one, you'll see that we get quite a new permit look and feel. I'll open that PDF. And what I can see this time is that I've got the answers to the safety precautions printed in. Any that didn't allow a not applicable answer are greyed out, so you couldn't have answered those as not applicable. And down here I've got the capture of the signatures for the hot works permit. And the same thing's going to happen obviously for the fire system impairment. So I can add the answers to that all the way through. And then if I know the answers to these, there may not be any locks, there may not be an electrical or mechanical system isolated, but I may know that the fire system's isolated by this or affected by this now is sort of basement level 1 boiler room. So I can fill that in. I can sign this one. And then when I generate this one, you get all the answers, the questions that I filled in, and of course the signatures again. So there's all the answers. You can see the PPEs printed out as well. So all the information that we needed to capture is on the permit, ready for either emailing or printing. Now these templates are now fully customizable. We can move things around, we can add things, we can change the declarations, but most importantly, most significantly, we can now generate the specific permits that you use within your FM company. So if you don't want to use our templates anymore, we can produce all of the templates for any of the FM companies. Those can be generated for you. You can use that as your suite, and they would automatically be filled in with all the information that's necessary. So the last thing to do in the life cycle of the permit, obviously, is to close them. And as you can imagine, this is where we would capture the signatures. So I'm just going to issue these to get them into the right status. So those are now open permits. And then when I go to close them, I've got another opportunity to sign them. So I won't go through the full sequence this time. I'll just show you the access permit for simplicity. When I sign this one, the sequence is in the opposite order, obviously. So the person in charge is Simon this time, and then it'll be Howard. I've been using my finger on the screen here because it's touch sensitive, but just to demonstrate that you don't have to have a touch sensitive screen, what I'm doing this time is writing it with my mouse. So there's Howard's signature done with the mouse. So we just save that. And what you've got then is an opportunity to view that PDF to see all of the 4 signatures on there. So this is our fully signed authorization to access with the first 2 signatures and the second 2. You can see that one down the bottom there was done with the mouse. Now, one of the things that I know a lot of you do out there is to scan in the printed signed paperwork that we've been generating with wet signatures and uploading it at the point of closing the permit. So I know what a lot of people have been doing is to browse to the scan and upload it. One of the nice things is you don't need to do that anymore because the permits are all saved in the background. And if you want to go and have a look at them, you can download those signed permits if ever you needed to pull one out of the archive. Okay, so I'll just close all of those permits in the bundle. So that's the complete life cycle.